It's the return of the Locked On Blue Jackets top 25 under 25-year-old players. And today we are starting at the bottom of the rankings with the honorable mentions and ranks 25 to 20. So let's get into it.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get into it, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day every single day. And this is going to be the programming for the next couple episodes. So in lieu of, obviously, breaking news, which we are all crossing our fingers and our toes and other digits, that we will get an Adam Fantilli contract announcement soon. But until then, I figured let's talk about the organization, the youth movement in the organization, because it feels fair to say that the Blue Jackets used to be one of the more promising young teams in the league, right? Like they had a great prospect pool and a decent core of young players. That core of young players is slowly getting older and is not really, the pool isn't really being replaced by anyone of a similar caliber, right? Like, and obviously there's some heavy hitters that are going to be on this list, Adam Fantilli, Denton Matejchuk, Kent Johnson, Cole Sillinger are the NHLers that are still eligible to be on this list. They've got a handful of promising prospects, but no one at the level of, a Fantilli, for example. There's a couple of guys that could hit Matejchuk level on this list, and there's guys like Jackson Smith, Oscar Hemming, Caden Lindstrom, the former first round picks, Pyotr Andrianov, et cetera, right? Like there's promise on the list for sure, but it feels like we've moved from that time a couple of years ago where there were so many good players that the Blue Jackets had that were 25 and under, and now they are mostly, it seems, a team of older players. And now partially that's due to a bunch of guys have graduated. So Jack Reeves, for example, turned 25. Kromachenko and Dmitry Voronkov both graduated from the list. Guys like that. Igor Chidakov made the top 10 last year and is obviously no longer with the team. So there's been a fair amount of movement, lots of movement. But I want to kind of just get into my methodology. We're going to talk about my rankings and also the field rankings and how they differ. So we're going to be using primarily the field rankings for this, and then I'll say, well, here is where I had that guy in my personal, because I feel like that's fair. A bunch of people voted on this, and I would like to use your hard work in this because I appreciate it. So I have my own list of rankings, and then but we're going to use the ones that you guys voted for. So the way I kind of went about this, and there's not really a wrong way or a right way to do this because, top 25, I can be like, right, well, who's the best under 25 player in the organization right now versus who is the most promising. So a lot of them I looked at, I was like, right, okay, well, we look at NHL experience, NHL ceiling, and potential, right? So there are a couple of guys on here that I think are probably surprisingly high on the list, on my ranking anyway, that might get some questions. But I kind of, when I wasn't sure about a player, what I did was I was like, right, how much more likely is he to make the NHL than this guy? How much more likely is he to be an impact player in the NHL than this guy, right? So, again, it's not just, well, it's the four NHLers that are on this list are 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Like there's some movement, there's some nuance, let's say. So let's get into it because I don't want to ramble about too long, even though I love to ramble. You know me. We're going to talk about the honorable mentions first. And so the way that I pulled the honorable mentions, so as not to just make it secretly the top 30 under 25 players, is I looked at which players appeared on my ranking that didn't appear on the field ranking and vice versa, right? So we've got four guys one guy that that didn't make my top 25 that was in the field, and then I've got three guys that were on my ranking that didn't make the field rankings, if that makes sense. So honorable mentions. This was kind of a surprising one to me. When I did my rankings, I was surprised to see that he dropped out of the top 25. I'm just going to pull up the thing from last year to see where he ranked, because obviously there's a lot of repeat guys. So last year he was ranked 16th overall. This year for me he hit 30, I believe, which is kind of a steep drop, and that's Charlie Ellick. And this is I don't think this is necessarily a comment on Ellick, who is much the same player as he was this time last year, right? But therein kind of lies the problem, right? I feel like I didn't see a ton of growth from Ellick this year. It was great to see him make his pro debut with Cleveland. He played on a team that started strong in the WHL and then finished miserably. But I don't feel like he has become I don't feel like he's added anything to his game this year that he didn't already have last year, right? And kind of what I want to see from a prospect of this age is growth. And he's still a very good skater. He's still a very physical player. His puck handling continues to be the biggest issue in his game. And also I have, questions about the hockey IQ as well. So this is not necessarily a mark on him getting worse as a player. I think it's that he kind of stayed where he was, and a bunch of players jumped over him. So a bunch of the players that are above him on this list are guys that were drafted this year or last year, right? So guys that have just kind of jumped him in the pool. It's not great that a guy who was a second round pick, and quite a high second round pick, I think 41st last year, like a reasonably high second round pick, has dropped this much in the rankings. Like, that doesn't look great, but I'm going to be really interested to see what he does in Cleveland. So that's the guy that I had as 30 and was on the field rankings. And then the other guys, Alessandro Di Iorio made my list, but did not make the field list. Di Iorio was drafted in the third round of this draft, was reasonably talked about as I'm surprised that he's still there. A bunch of the public prospect guys had him ranked higher than that. He's going to be playing for the Sarnia Sting this year, and then, as I believe, committed to Boston University, I want to say. So he is very much in the mold of a Blue Jackets draft pick. I feel like he is, or recently, this was one that you look at and you're like, okay, he is a very well-rounded player. He's not what I would consider necessarily elite at anything. He had 31 points in the OHL at 45 games, played for the under-18s, had 3 assists in 5 games, is a center, listed as 6'1", so not the biggest guy in the world, but for a third-round pick is kind of, this is a player with a lot of promise. I think his ceiling is probably middle six, probably closer to a third liner than a second liner, but I think he could either be a low tier second liner versus a mid tier third liner. I think is where the exact spread of his ceiling to floor is, in my opinion. Obviously his floor is much lower than that, but if he hits, then I guess the spectrum of his ceiling is what we're talking about here. Like, he could be as high as a low tier second line player, or his ceiling could be middle of the pack third line player. He could be a fourth line player, but I think he is a guy that made my list. Where did he make my list? Yeah, he was kind of the mid teens in my list, which is maybe a little bit higher than where some people had him. But I think he's a guy that shows a lot of potential, and a guy that will probably play NHL games. He's a couple of years away, definitely a project, but will play NHL games, I think. Much like the other two guys that made the honorable mentions list. So Oiva Keskinen I was surprised he wasn't higher in the field. He was listed at, I believe, 27 on this list. I had him much higher. I had him in the mid-teens as well. This is a guy that could play NHL games this year. This is a guy that is probably going to be a very, very good AHL player. Obviously, last year he came over. He didn't make the NHL, so they loaned him back to Finland. He had one of those European clauses in his contract where if he didn't make the NHL, he was allowed to go back to Finland rather than play in the AHL. I'm unsure if that clause exists again this season. I don't know the ins and outs of it necessarily, but he's a guy that I think a lot of people are looking at as potential for a fourth line role. The Blue Jackets don't have a ton of space on the fourth line right now, unless they're willing to, punt one of the veterans to the side. But I look at who the options for that line are at the minute, and I'm like, okay, well, would I rather have Keskinen, or would I rather have like Miles Wood, for example, right? Like, and the answer is I would rather have Miles Wood, I think. So that's a lie. I would rather have Keskinen than Miles Wood. Complete. I was looking at Miles Wood's number on my list, and that threw me off so badly. So Keskinen, I think, probably isn't going to be much higher than a fourth liner, but I think his floor to ceiling is a much smaller spectrum than some of the other guys that are on this list, right? Like, he's going to be a top of the lineup AHL player, maybe a fourth liner in the NHL. I don't think he'll get much higher than that. Like, I don't think he's going to stretch to being a third liner, but if he can carve out a role on the fourth line, then I think that is a huge success for a draft pick. He was a 7th round draft pick, who has since kind of torn it up in the Finnish league. Had 37 points in 49 games this season, had 35 and 50 in 59 last season, 27 and 54 the season before that. So he's shown growth at every single stage. Had 8 points in 17 playoff games, even for Tappara in the Liga. And I think will make hopefully make a fourth line much better for the Blue Jackets. Again, not the biggest guy in the world, but a lot of potential, which is really exciting. And the last guy on this list is another guy that I had. In fairness, this guy ended up much higher on my rankings than I thought he would. So the way the Rumble rank works is it just kind of pits you 2 players against each other and spits out a ranking at the end. So you're like, oh, okay. It does all of the hard work for you, essentially, instead of having to sit here and be like, well, this guy's 1 and this guy's 2 and this guy's 3. It does it all for you. So again, I had Buckberger in the mid-teens, but he was the honorable mentions for the field. So that's where he lives. This is a guy that I also think has potential to play NHL games this year. He was a college free agent, I believe. I'm just pulling up where exactly he played last season. Oh, he played for Denver University. He is a defenseman, again, on the smaller side of things. He's only 5'11", but he had 29 points in 43 games for the University of Denver last season. Has, I believe, 2 national championships under his belt. Obviously went undrafted. He's 23 years old, which is on the older side of things for a prospect to be making his pro debut, I feel like. But he's going to be really interesting because I don't think that he's necessarily a guy that will step straight into the NHL, but I do think that there is room for him to make his case. Again, they're gonna play. Eric Branson's gonna get games this season. The question is just how many, right? Like, because on one hand, he probably shouldn't be an everyday NHL player. On the other hand, I don't know that he'll stay healthy, so it might be a moot point, right? So Buckberger is one of those guys that I think is going to have the chance to prove his case. If he comes in, has a strong training camp, a strong preseason, yeah, he maybe gets sent down to the AHL. But he's one of those guys that I think if he plays well, he's going to be on the top of their list. Similar to Guillaume Richard, who we'll talk about, not in this episode, I don't think, but a little bit later on. And he's a guy that is going to be really, really interesting to see what he's picked up. Because here's the thing. Yes, he was undrafted, but he's just spent 3 years at the University of Denver, which is one of the most successful NCAA teams over the past 3 years. Like I said, 2 out of 3 of the last national championships. One of the best coaches in the NCAA game at the minute in David Carr. Like, what has he picked up there? How has he grown as a player that he didn't have when he was 18, right? Because, again, 4 years ago, he was playing in the USHL, went to Denver, played 3 years there, again, has improved basically every year since then. And there's a lot of potential there. Again, do I think his ceiling is much above third pairing? Probably not, but that's a guy that is definitely an option. A break glass in case of emergency, right? And again, you don't know what you've got until you play him. Jet Greaves is a really great example of this. Undrafted free agent, just signed him on a whim. And I'm not saying that he's going to turn into Jet Greaves, obviously. You know, he's not going to turn into a top 10 defenseman in the sport or a top 30 defenseman in the sport or whatever. But if he can carve out an NHL role, because there is an NHL role to be had there for a bottom pairing defenseman. And again, if the Blue Jackets need to shed cap, if they need to move someone like Dante Fabro, they're going to need another defenseman down there. And I think Buck Burger is one of the more intriguing options on the list for guys that we'll talk about in that potential role. There's holes in the bottom of this lineup for guys to outperform the veterans that, you know, have kind of default been put there. And I think Buck Burger, kind of like Keskinen, is one of those guys that I think has a real option to show up at camp and show up big, which I think would be exciting. Let's take a quick break. And then when we get back, we'll talk about ranks 20 through 25. It'll be 21 through 25, I believe. So that is who we are going to talk about next. First, I'm going to tell you about Odoo. Running a business should not feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. And that is where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place. Odoo is one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working towards the same goal, and that's true in sports just like it is in business. Again, I keep going back to, we haven't talked about Odoo for a minute, but the Carolina Hurricanes won the Cup, an organization that is famous for having everybody from the GM to the replacement level players in the AHL are all on the same page. They play the same way, they train the same way, they use the same structures, they have the same desire, and that's why they won. That's why they won the Cup. Everybody was on the same page. That's what makes a successful organization. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Thanks for making us your first listen for the day every single day. We're going to talk now about 25 through 21, except I screwed up. I forgot how counting works, and we actually already did number 25. So Alessandro Di Iorio was number 25 on this list. New addition to the list. We're not going to talk about him again because we already just talked about him, but for the sake of clarity, we are going to be talking about 21, 22, 23, and 24 in this segment because I accidentally already did 25 because I forgot how counting works. So with that said, let's go to number 24 on the list, which is Owen Griffin, who is a returning player, was a 5th round draft pick a couple of years ago, and has jumped from 42 ranking last year, which was dead last, to 24 this year. He had a reasonably good season for his OHL team. I'm just pulling up his numbers now. He is a guy that actually, he got the Luca Pinelli treatment this year, which I thought was fun, which is that he got assigned to the Monsters when his season was done. So he played on a very bad Oshawa Generals team. He had 67 points in 66 games. They did not make the playoffs. And when the season was done, he got to go over to Cleveland. He didn't play any games there. But he did get to train with the team, and he was there as one of their playoff Black Aces, which I think is, again, invaluable experience. It's what Luca Pinelli did the year before making the jump the year after. So, again, he had a slow start. His draft year, he had kind of a slow start. He finished with 51 points in 62 games. Then he had 29 points in 21 playoff games, including 16 goals. And it seems like he really picked up where he left off with that. Again, he had 25 goals for, once again, a very bad Oshawa Generals team. And it looks like he's going to be playing for the Guelph Storm in the upcoming season. So hopefully he'll have more team success there, but he has made a huge jump just in terms of straight up points. He was always listed as a smart player. Again, he's not going to get any bigger. I don't think. He's 5'11". like I said, 5th round draft pick. So if he makes the NHL at all, it's a win. But I do think there's something there. And again, if he turns into like a Trafik Swilanski level player of excellent in the AHL, gets cups of coffee in the NHL, and never really manages to put that NHL career together, that feels like a win to me. But Owen Griffin, 24th on this list. I had him at 23rd on mine, which is pretty close. I like this player a whole lot. I don't know that he's going to turn into anything for the NHL, but I think I have him as a reasonably good AHL player with definite potential if he continues to improve, which he's still young. If he goes to a better team, he could really pop off this season. I'm expecting him to turn pro at the conclusion of the upcoming season. Again, following the Pinelli model. Wasn't quite as good as Pinelli in his pre-going pro year. So Pinelli's almost in Pinelli's equivalent year. I think he had almost 50 goals in the OHL, which is insane. But a very, very good performance for someone like Owen Griffin. The question now is, can he take that next step? And can he succeed in a new team that is hopefully going to be better than his old team? But again, the Generals, very bad last season. So it would be hard for the Guelph Storm to be worse. We'll see how it goes. So that's, what was that, number 24? Number 23 is Jonas Wu, and I'm relieved. Okay, this sounds really bad. Jonas Wu is not the player that was hospitalized for ASU. It hadn't been named for ages, but I was worried as we kind of ramped up to this that he was, because again, the player hadn't been named. It was a newcomer. And I wasn't sure how I was going to talk about it. Obviously, we are sending all of our well wishes and thoughts and prayers to Matthew Birch, who is the player that was hospitalized. He's a St. Louis Blues prospect. It's a really, really awful situation that, like, I don't understand how ASU thought that this was acceptable to do. And I think there's going to be some real consequences that come of this. But Jonas Wu, also going to be playing for ASU this upcoming season, is another late pick. Was, I believe, a 6th round pick for the Blue Jackets most recently. So new to the list. Obviously was not on the list last year because he was just drafted 5 minutes ago. 6th round draft pick, is, again, teeny tiny. He's 5'9" as a defenseman, which is basically nothing. And he still had 86 points in 56 games for the Medicine Hat Tigers, had 17 points in 13 playoff games. Now, points for a defenseman in Major Junior do not necessarily translate to the NHL. Denton Matejchuk is a pretty good example of this. He obviously kind of had a little bit of an offensive breakout this season, but he was one of the best offensive defensemen in the WHL for like his draft year and his D+1 year, right? Jonas Wu is an overager. He is, I believe, anyway, he's oh, maybe he's not, maybe I'm lying. I know how counting works. He is going to be going to Arizona State this year. Is a guy that is, if he makes it, he's going to make it comfortably. Like, my guess is that there's a second pair defenseman in there, but him making it is such a long shot, right? Like, that's why, and, we talk about this all the time. Like, you look at, like, well, small defensemen make it, look at Lane Hudson. Denton Matejchuk's not the biggest guy in the world. I always think back, Duncan Keith was, I think, 5'11" officially, and almost definitely smaller than that, and was one of the best defensemen of kind of the late 2000s, early 2010s, right? Between like 2005 and 2015, I would say he was one of the best defensemen. Maybe that's too wide a category, but again, he's small. But we talk about the small players because it's so rare that they make it, right? For every Johnny Gaudreau, there's 10 guys that don't make it because they're also 5'9", and they just don't have what Gaudreau had. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Jonas Wu is going to make it because guys like Lane Hudson make it. But if he makes it, I think he's going to be great. It is such a boom or bust draft pick, which I love in the 6th round. Why not? Why not take a guy that had almost 90 points as a defenseman in the WHL? Now, yes, he was playing with the Ruck Twins, who were excellent. Yes, he was playing with Bryce Pickford, who had a historic defenseman season. He had like 45 goals or something as a defenseman in the WHL, which is insane. He was playing with a lot of players. The question is going to be, can he put it together at the NCAA level? Can he put it together without playing with guys like Pickford and guys like the Ruck Twins? I'm not sure, but definitely a guy that's going to be really interesting to watch because he is either going to burn bright or he's going to flame out almost immediately, and the odds are not in his favor, but if he overcomes them, man, it's going to be fun to watch. We're going to take another quick break, and then we're going to do 22 and 21. We're going to finish off that, and then that'll be our episode today. We're going to do that in just a second. First, I will tell you about Indeed. Support for today's episode comes from Indeed Sponsored Jobs. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific needs like skills, certifications, and location. So less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. People are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed according to their worldwide data. Usually the biggest difference isn't having someone who does more work, right? It's having somebody who knows exactly what needs to happen and helps everything run smoother. It's not about being the best person. It's about being the right person. Something that NHL teams know very well, right? So spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes. Less stress, less time, better results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners to this show are going to get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We've got two more players that I want to talk about today. Two guys that are returning to the list. And that is number 22 is William Whitelaw, who has taken a small jump. He's 28th on last year's list, had an extremely good year at Western Michigan, which is great news because he's back for a second year. This is going to be his fourth year in college. And his first 3 years, he was on 3 different teams, right? So he played a pretty decent freshman year at the University of Wisconsin, moved to the University of Michigan, was fine, didn't take the steps forward that I think people wanted, and then transferred over to Western Michigan and basically doubled his point total. Had a really, really great season there, 19 goals, 34 points, and is returning for second year at Western Michigan. And I think this is a really great sign because one of the concerns with William Whitelaw has always been coachability and attitude, right? Like the talent is undeniable. In his draft year, he's playing for the Youngstown Phantoms. He had 61 points in 62 games and 9 points in 9 playoff games, right? Like a point a game player as a 17-year-old is pretty good, right? It's pretty good going. The problem has always been he bounces around teams a lot, which I think is not always a bad sign, but usually is. But he's coming back for a second year at Western Michigan is great. I think it probably means he's gelled with the team a little bit. He seems happy there. He seems to have finally clicked, and again had a pretty great junior season. This is going to be his senior year. So my guess is he turns pro the year after this, and we'll see what he's got in the AHL, see whether he can make that jump. But like I said, I think the biggest thing is that he didn't just enter the transfer portal again, because I think he was unhappy at Wisconsin, whether that was with ice time, whether that was with quality of team, whether that was with coaching, whatever. Moved to Michigan, a better team, and was kind of, I think I expected him anyway to have a better season than he did at Michigan. I think he grew in terms of like well-roundedness of skills. I think he improved on some specific things, but overall, I think his game was kind of much the same as it was at Wisconsin, which it really should have been better under a better team, under a better coach, in a better quote unquote organization than Michigan, which is seen as, it's not had the skill that it had in kind of the 2021-22 years, when they were churning out top 5 NHL picks like it was nothing. But it's still a very good, like it still draws players. It's still a very good destination in college, right? Went to Western Michigan, which was a smaller school. Maybe he's just excited to be the bigger fish than he was in Michigan. But I think this is a good sign. I think this is a sign of growth that he hasn't just immediately jumped and gone to another team. 4 teams in 4 years of college would be a rough look. So Hopefully he's figured it out at Western Michigan. Again, I'm expecting a big year from him. And then he is going to go to the AHL after this, and we'll see what the AHL holds for him. We'll see if he has actually grown as a player, because I think any issues that he had in college are going to be exacerbated by the AHL, especially in terms of, if he doesn't have the right attitude, he's not going to succeed in the pro levels. And I think that will be a real shame, because he's got all of the skill in the world. He just struggles to he struggles to put it all together. So really, really promising player, but I understand why he is this low in the rankings, because there's questions. He's a little bit lower in the field than I had him 20th in my rankings. But this feels about right to me. 20 to 22 for Whitelaw. Would love to see him take a massive jump next season if he does turn pro, if he does have a huge season at Western Michigan this year. The last player we're going to talk about today is Evan Gardner, who did turn pro, made his regular season pro debut for the Cleveland Monsters after, made his playoff debut this year, I believe. He played one pro game last season, near the end of the season. This season he played one playoff game, or part of a playoff game, I believe, which was a real rough time in the Cleveland goaltending thing. Is they ended up having to put him in because they had to pull Fedotov, I believe. Fedotov has since gone back to Russia, missed the rest of that playoff series with injury. Zach Sorchenko held down the fort. This is going to be Evan Gardner's full pro season. He had an extremely good draft year. Took over the starting role halfway through the season and never looked back. And then has unfortunately dropped in stats since then. So he had a 927 in his draft year, a 911 the year after that, and then a 902 the year after that. And that's not typically a great sign. I remain wary of goalies that come out of the WHL or the CHL in general, but because he's in the WHL, that's what we're talking about. I remain wary of goalies that come out of Major Junior, just because I think that it's easy to get stuck in being the big fish in a little pond for goalies. I think they need to have challenges. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he does at the pro level. I would have loved him to have been able to take a season in college or two, because I don't know how much he was challenged in the WHL after his rookie season where he shocked everyone. He was the starter for Saskatoon for the next two seasons. Had 23 wins in 44 games and then 25 wins in 52. Played 11 playoff games last year, had a 907 in them, had a very good playoffs for them, right? I don't know whether Evan Gardner has NHL potential. Maybe. But it's hard for me to look at him. Again, maybe he'll surprise me, but I am really curious to see what this AHL season holds for him, because if he's good, and he shows this big jump, but my guess is that he has kind of a wobbly AHL season, kind of a wobbly AHL rookie season, and next season is where we're really going to see what he has, just because I think the jump from WHL to AHL is so huge for goalies. And with Elvis Moslikins being out, the goalie pipeline has been shaken. I thought that we were going to have a Copley-Gardner tandem down there and have Gardner be the rookie and have Copley as the veteran guy to support him. Now it looks like Copley might be starting the season in the NHL and Gardner might get thrown to the Wolves a little bit. My guess is that depending on what the Elvis timeline is like, the Blue Jackets will add another goalie. They should probably add another goalie anyway, just to be safe. But I don't know that there's significant NHL time in Gardner's future, which is a shame, because I was really, really high on him in his draft year. And again, I think he just kind of stagnated at the WHL level, which is a real shame. Really, really nice kid. Great attitude. Again, has the skill to put it together. I don't know if he has the skill to jump to the next level. And again, I think whether he sinks or swims this season, I think is going to be important. But even if he does sink this season, whether he can manage to learn from his mistakes this season and next season, I think is where you're going to see the real. So when I said next season, we're talking about the 27-28 season is when I think you're going to see what you have in Evan Gardner. Maybe you'll surprise me, but I don't know. I feel like I'm being overly mean on a goalie, which is obviously very against my religion and general life goals. But I wish I was a little bit more confident in him than I am right now. I really hope he surprises me. I would love to be wrong about Evan Gardner. But again, the other thing as well is goalies, voodoo. Nonsense. Sometimes stupid stuff happens with them. He could be the best goalie in the league this season in the AHL, and that would just be a thing that happens, right? I don't think it's going to be. Odds are low, but never zero. But here we are. So that kind of wraps up today. Tomorrow, we're going to keep this going. Tomorrow, we're going to do 20 through 16, I believe. I think tomorrow we're going to do 20 through 11. So we'll do another 10 players tomorrow, and then Friday we'll do 10 through 6, and then Monday we'll do 5 through 1. I think is how the breakdown is going to go. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for listening to this episode, making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. You can also find us over on Twitter at LO_Blue Jackets. Obviously, all of this scheduling is dependent on whether the Adam Fantilli contract happens, which we're crossing our fingers. And if not, I guess we'll deal with that when it comes up. But as of right now, the plan tomorrow is to do the next installment of Top 25 Under 25. So until then, make sure you stay locked on.